So many of the same problems came up in Miami's upset loss to Georgia Tech, but this time didn't have enough fourth quarter magic to cover those problems up. Was this the punch in the mouth that the Miami Hurricanes needed?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Unfamiliar territory. We've been so spoiled coming on after wins, but here we are. I'm Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we will talk about Miami's now updated scenario for an ACC championship and a possible college football playoff bid. And listen, I know. After losing to Georgia Tech, maybe the last thing that some of you want to hear about is the opportunity at making it into the CFP, because that was a bad loss. Credit to Georgia Tech, but that Miami had no excuse losing that game. So we'll talk about the things that the Hurricanes have to fix now during the bye week that's coming up. Probably a good time to head into a bye week, but we'll talk about the reasons why Miami lost this game, 28-23, on the road to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Hurricanes had zero answers on defense for Georgia Tech's rushing attack. And that happened despite the fact that Georgia Tech's running back room was an infirmary. You were getting guys who were former walk-ons, players you hadn't heard of. Their stud, Jamal Haynes, who had a big run early, ended up, missing most of the game. He was banged up. He only played in the first quarter. Despite that, the Hurricanes go on to give up 271 rushing yards. And this happened even though Georgia Tech was barely any threat whatsoever to throw the football. They were one-dimensional. Miami knew exactly what was coming, still had no answers for it on D. Hurricanes were incapable of setting the edge. That was really troubling on Georgia Tech's outside runs. There was a lot of poor technique, whether that comes down strictly to coaching, strictly to players, freelancing. I'm sure it was a combination of both of those things. That needs to be addressed in a big way during the bye week. Another area that the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets dominated against Miami, and this was important. This was their strategy. They executed it to perfection because Miami couldn't stop their running game. Time of possession. The Ramblin' Wreck had 35 minutes of possession to Miami's 25. We always say it, the best way to stop Cam Ward is to keep him off the field. Limit his possessions. Miami only ends up running 63 plays in the game. So, and again, that's not an automatic, because any team when facing Miami would like to, we would like to outpossess Cam Ward by 10 minutes. It's one thing to say it. Florida State, tried to do that. To actually execute it the way that Georgia Tech did shows glaring holes on Miami's defense. Good strategy, well executed by Georgia Tech. Miami's defensive line, not necessarily surprisingly given the situation, but once again, unable to produce sacks. Miami had 1 sack last week against Duke, 0 sacks yesterday against Georgia Tech, but I know the opportunities were limited with the Yellow Jackets only dropping back 16 times to throw, but still, we haven't seen the sort of threats from Miami's defensive line that we did earlier on in the season. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech's defense, they sacked Cam Ward 3 times. They entered the game ranked 126th in the country in sacks. Here was, I thought, outside of time of possession, the biggest statistical reasons why Miami came up short in this football game, because a usual superpower to Miami's offense is converting third downs, no matter the situation. 3rd and 1, we're getting it. 3rd and 15, we're getting it. Anything in between that, we're getting it. This time around, Miami went just 3 for 10 on 3rd down. 30%, that was way below their average of 58.8% coming in. 3 for 10 on 3rd down, 1 for 4 on 4th down. So these money downs are usually automatic. It was poor execution on some plays. Like Miami had a big 3rd and 9 that Sam Brown dropped the ball right in the breadbasket that should have been a 3rd down conversion. And then I also thought some of the play calling. This was, for all of Miami's coaches. For Lance Guidry, the defensive coordinator, this was probably his worst game. For Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, by far his worst game. For Mario Cristobal, his worst game of the season so far. And I thought the play calling on some of the fourth downs, I didn't necessarily disagree. A couple of them I did, but when you're going to go for it on fourth down, whether you agree with the situation or not, I thought Miami got too cute on some of those fourth down calls. I mean, run the freaking ball on 4th and 1 when you've got that offensive line and you've got a wrecking ball like Damian Martinez. Don't get so cute the way that you did. Mario Cristobal said after the game, story of the game, he said, third down conversions. We did not sustain drives the way that Georgia Tech did. And yes, as I mentioned, I also thought Miami got outcoached in this game. And I don't just mean in schemes and preparedness, but also in situations. It's easy to second guess some of these things after you lose and after these things weren't converted. I get that. I am a second guesser in this case, but I really thought even at the time, Miami should have gone for 2 field goals in a couple of those fourth down situations when they were in Georgia Tech territory instead of going for those fourth downs that they failed to convert. So you think about it this way, listen, I know that this math doesn't define the game because the situations would have been changed, but Miami, who's got one of the best kickers in the country, by the way, automatic Andy Borregales. Miami left 6 points off the board in a game that they lost by 5. I also didn't necessarily love the decision to go for the 2-point conversion at the time that they went to. That left another point off of the board on what could have been an Andy Borregales field goal. Sometimes you have to take the points. Miami Hurricanes didn't get their usual magic, right? Because you think about it, a lot of these situations, this was not our first rodeo when it comes to being down double digits in the second half of a game. I mean, Miami was down 11 in the second half against Duke. Miami was down, by 25 in the second half against Cal. They were down big against Virginia Tech. So Miami's been in these situations before, but this time they didn't get their usual magic. And that's what happens when you're always skating on thin ice. At some point, that ice is going to break, and it broke against Georgia Tech. I do not blame Cam Ward for this loss. Listen, I know ultimately the ball was in his hands with under 2 minutes with a chance to win the game. And, he didn't come through. He was hit and fumbled. But I don't blame him for this loss. Like, even though he didn't lead the game-winning drive that he usually delivers on, he still managed 348 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, while completing 64% of his passes. Like, you can't put the blame on the best player on the team for once not being able to overcome everyone else's mistakes. That's why I don't blame Cam Ward for this. But obviously, his Heisman Trophy candidacy took a big hit yesterday, whether that's fair or unfair. That happened because his team didn't win. He didn't have his Heisman moment at the end of the game. So Cam Ward actually dropped to 4th in the Heisman odds. He dropped from 1st to 4th. He's now behind Travis Hunter, Dylan Gabriel, and Ashton Genty. But the most important thing is winning games. I don't think Cam is going to lose any sleep over not being the Heisman favorite. He's going to lose a lot of sleep over Miami being 9-1 instead of 9-0. If you can't stop, you're going back to Miami's defense. If you can't stop an average team, because that's what Georgia Tech is, if you can't stop an average team from converting a 3rd and 18, you don't deserve to be called a championship contender. This was a game where Miami could really have used a timely takeaway or two. Miami forced 0 turnovers, right? I mean, when they were down to Duke last week, they forced 3 second-half turnovers. That helped get them back in the game. This time around, the turnovers weren't there to be had. So credit to Georgia Tech for taking care of the football. Not every player played poorly. I'm going to give credit to certain Miami players. A lot of credit to Jalen Alderman. Miami linebacker made a big stop on a Georgia Tech 3rd and 1 near the end of the game to give Miami one more drive, one more opportunity. Mario Cristobal said afterwards, the routine stuff that we're good at did not show up. He said, we had a chance with the ball, but turned it over late in the game. Big game and big play for Elijah Arroyo, Miami's tight end, number 8, caught a 76-yard touchdown for Miami's first score of the game. That was a great play. Credit to Xavier Restrepo, caught a 38-yard touchdown during Miami's comeback bid. He's now the record holder at Miami. He broke one of those records last week, breaks 2 more this week. He's now the record holder at Miami for career receptions, career receiving yards, and career receiving touchdowns. Xavier Restrepo is one of the very best to ever suit up at Miami. Cam Ward, by the way, now holds one of Miami's single-season passing records. He's now the single-season leader in touchdown passes with 32 on the year. He passed Steve Walsh. The old record was 29. When we come back, we'll talk about what happens next, all right? Because, again, there was some deserved loss for Miami, deserved win for Georgia Tech. The Hurricanes, how far do they drop now in the polls? And important, we'll give you the situation, Miami's situation for a possible ACC championship appearance. Goes without saying you have to play better than you did yesterday, but where Miami now stands in the ACC, you guys want to keep it locked right here. We're nowhere near done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You know, I'm nowhere near done yet with FanDuel. Guys, we got all this NFL action today. Go tackle that NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers on FanDuel can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, so much more, right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're also proudly brought to you by GameTime. Guys, this is the best ticket app. It's the only ticket app that I use because I know I'm getting the best prices, especially the closer you get to game time. The prices get better even when you wait till the last minute. And I'm also getting the best features on this app. Guys, check out the new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, because Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Folks, I love the all-in pricing feature on Game Time. It shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get panoramic views from your seat right there in the app before you buy. The Game Time lowest price guarantee means Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. And how about this? We got a deal for you. When you download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege, and we'll give you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. And thank you for sticking with us, right? We don't have any room for fair weather fans on Locked On Canes. The real ones also check us out after losses. And that was a tough one. That was a gut check. And I said at the beginning of the episode, was that the punch in the mouth that Miami needed? Because I know that there have been some folks out there. J.D. Piquel from On3 Sports has been saying, in his mind, I didn't want to hear this, of course, when Miami was undefeated, but in his mind, he thought Miami needed to suffer a loss like this because they've been living on the edge for too long, and maybe suffering a loss as they did yesterday might be something that gives them a wake-up call and actually propels them to fixing some of these issues. Because, folks, my hope had been, I said this so many times on the show, my hope had been Miami could learn lessons in victory, right? That if you had victories like you've had where, hey, our defense played really poorly, but we still managed to win, that would give you a reason to learn and fix some things. I also understand that 10 games into a season, maybe you are who you are, but at the same time, so many of Miami's mistakes, mental lapses, discipline, simple techniques, I would like to think there is some chance, even if you don't completely change your identity, that there is an opportunity to clean some of these things up. So what happens next? First, we're going to be watching the rankings. AP poll, coaches poll come out later today. The one that really matters, the college football playoff poll, comes out on Tuesday. Now, when you lose a game in the SEC, like Georgia did yesterday, the committee will treat that like a bye week. Georgia will probably just drop a couple of spots. That's how this works. But unfortunately for us, when you lose a game in the ACC, Miami fans are about to experience what I will refer to as a rankings apocalypse. I expect Miami to tumble big time when the new CFP rankings come out on Tuesday. I think the Canes, who are number 4 at the moment, are probably going to tumble somewhere like 10th, 11th, 12th. Would they drop Miami out of the top 12? I doubt they drop Miami out of the top 12, but I would not be surprised to have 2 digits next to Miami instead of just the one digit that you had this past week. I think you're going to fall pretty far. And again, you wonder if this sort of a loss, if this can be a turning point in a positive way, because I know in a lot of years past, Miami loses a game and it becomes a negative turning point. 2017, after Miami's 10-0 start, they lost a game to Pittsburgh. They lost a game even worse to Clemson in the ACC championship game. They lost their bowl game that year. I know that Miami fans are accustomed to spirals, right? Downward spirals, where I'm hoping this can be a positive turning point for us. Because, yes, Miami's been living dangerously since October. Defense regressing, counting on miracles from your stud quarterback and your receivers to bail you out. They couldn't bail you out yesterday. Miami goes into the bye week with a chance to reflect, learn, correct, and hopefully get mad, because this team has a lot to fix, especially on defense. Technique, understanding of simple situations, tackling, discipline, some personnel questions. Can Miami get cornerback Damari Brown back after the bye week? I hope so. He's been injured since the Florida game. Could be a big boost. Mario Cristobal has hinted that he's close to a return. You got a bye week this week, Wake Forest on the 23rd. Maybe Damari Brown could be ready for a comeback. So, folks, funny thing about all this, here's the situation, all right? Miami loses to Georgia Tech yesterday, and you feel like, man, this season's over. This team's not going anywhere. Now, that's up to Miami. How Miami responds from that loss, because this is really going to show you what this team is made of. If these guys come out motivated, I still appreciate the strong leadership council, guys like Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, the Maui Noah brothers, Jalen Rivers. They're going to hold everybody accountable in that locker room. I am hoping and expecting a positive response from this. But crazy enough, despite losing that game yesterday, Miami once again controls their own destiny in the ACC. So right after the loss, Miami temporarily was in a situation where even if you win out, you got Wake Forest at home, Syracuse away. Even if you win out, Miami was in a situation where you needed help from others in order to control your destiny in the ACC. It only took a couple of hours to get the help you needed, right? Because one of the teams that you needed to lose to get back in control, Pittsburgh, big favorites against Virginia last night. What did they do? They lose. So with the Pittsburgh Panthers losing to the Virginia Cavaliers, they get shout out UVA. Thank you for some help, Miami. Now it's up to Miami to actually take advantage of this, because again, you need to win 2 more games. But Miami now controls their own destiny again to get back to the ACC championship game. Now, you'd be on track to face SMU, assuming SMU doesn't lose a game, but you'd be on track to face SMU. Now, if Miami doesn't improve their defense, SMU might put up a 50-burger. Now, maybe Miami will put up a 60-burger in that game, but you got a lot to improve, a lot to reflect on. But crazy enough, after the events of yesterday, where we had to watch Georgia Tech fans tearing down the goalposts, Georgia Tech fans throwing the U upside down. After all that, Miami is still in a position where if you win out, you're in the ACC championship game. We have a lot of content coming up even during the bye week. Join us all week on Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for being here. Smash that like button and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.